Welcome back viewers. I am Surbhi Unyal. I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi, and we are doing a series on philosophy of mind. We are now talking about the identity theory, which is the identity between mind and the brain. We talked about how the identity theorists, they are in contrast with the dualists who propose that mind and body are two different substances. While the identity theorists, they are trying to establish, or they argue that mental states correspond to a specific physical state or the brain, or to say that mental and the physical aspect of our experiences are not separate, but they are actually the same thing. And we discussed that how the identity theorists, they bridge a gap between the mind and the brain by asserting that mental states are not fundamentally different from the physical states. And not being fundamentally different from the physical state, they are able to assert that there is a causal power that takes place between the mental events and the physical event that it gives rise to. So, while talking about the identity between mind and the brain, we were discussing that what do we really mean by identity. So, if you are talking about the identity between mind and the brain, we need to first understand what do this term identity mean from a philosophical perspective. So, we discussed that in philosophy, identity refers to a unique characteristic or properties that make an object to what it is, and it helps us in distinguishing it from the other objects. And this idea has been widely taken up in different branches of philosophy, be it metaphysics, epistemology, or ethics. And we also talked about how in metaphysics we talked about the idea of a person, or you can say the notion of personal identity, where we question that how a person remains to be a same person even during a gap of time, or at different times he remains to be a same person even when he undergoes a lot of changes. And here we discuss that identity can be understood in two different ways, that is the sameness or the continuity over time. So, as per the concept of sameness is concerned, we took up the question of the identity of the indiscernibles, where we try to understand that if two substances, or if two things or objects, let's say X and Y, if they share all the properties, can we say that they are the same thing? So, there is a sense of sameness between two objects here. And from the second perspective is the continuity over time, and here we took the example of personal identity again, which asks what it means for a person to be the same person over time. Now coming to some of the central questions related to identity in philosophy of mind. So the first one is, what does it mean for an object to be identical or same to itself? What does it mean for an object to be the same if it changes over time, as in the case of the person? Or the third one is, if X and Y are identical, must they always be identical? So these are some of the central questions that we deal with in philosophy of mind, specifically from the idea of identity theory, where they are asking whether or what does it mean for an object to be identical to itself, or if two objects are identical, will they be always identical to themselves or to each other? Or the third one is that what does it mean for an object to be the same if it changes over time, and that is where the question of continuity over time is raised. So, the law of identity is a fundamental principle of logic that states that every entity or object or thing is identical to itself In other words, it is a tautology that asserts that A is A, or that if something is identical to something else, then it is the same thing. So, law of identity is considered to be one of the three classic laws of thoughts, along with the law of non-contradiction and the law of excluded middle. Here, according to the law of identity, as stated earlier, there are two things that are happening here. One is that we say that there is a tautologous relationship between A and A, where we are saying that A is A, which means the object is identical to itself and it is not something else. So, A is known as a tautologous relationship. The other is we say that something is identical to something else. That is, it is these two substances or these two objects are the same thing, and this is the law of identity, which is one of the classic laws of thought. Now, having understood what identity means, let us now talk about two main types of identities. The first is qualitative identity and the other is the numerical identity. Now, what is qualitative identity? Qualitative identity refers to the shared properties or characteristics between two or more things, which may make them similar or even indistinguishable from one another. For example, two apples may have the same color, shape and texture, making them qualitatively identical. So, these two apples that have the same color, size and texture, they can be seen as identical to each other from the perspective of a qualitative identity, because the qualities that they are having, they are sharing the same properties or the characteristics between each other, and in that case we can say that they are identical from the qualitative aspect. So, there is a qualitative identity between various apples that are kept in a basket, where we are saying let's say they are red apples, or the size of the apple and the texture of the apples are the same. So, from that aspect they are similar or identical from the qualitative identity. So, X and Y are qualitatively identical if they exhibit sameness of qualities or properties. So, here we can say that X and Y, if there are two objects X and Y, they can be qualitatively identical if they exhibit sameness of qualities or properties. In contrast to qualitative identity, there is numerical identity, which refers to the idea that one thing is the same as itself and nothing else. In other words, numerical identity is concerned with the sameness of the particular object or entity over time despite any change it may undergo. For example, a particular tree may grow and change over time, but it remains numerically identical to itself. So, here we are not talking about the quality. In fact, we are saying that the thing is identical to itself even over a period of time. So, the concept of numerical identity necessitates complete qualitative identity and can only exist between an object and itself. Its name suggests a contentious notion that it is the only identity relationship that allows us to accurately count or enumerate objects. According to this view, X and Y can only be counted as one if they are numerically identical, meaning they refer to the same individual entity. For example, this is a classic example that we can give here is that of morning star and the evening star. So, morning star and the evening star are numerically identical. Why? because we can say here that morning star is identical to the evening star and they both are identical to the planet Venus. So they are numerically identical as they are the same thing. So in this example, as many of you must be aware that morning star and evening star are the same thing. They are identical to each other. Why? Because they are referring to the same thing. It is morning star and evening star are the two names of planet Venus. So they are numerically identical in the sense of they are both referring to the same thing. So they are identical as they are the same thing, or you can say they are referring to the same thing in this case. So morning star is Venus and evening star is also Venus. Hence morning star is identical to the evening star, because both morning star and the evening star is planet Venus. So that is what they mean to say here, that X and Y can be counted as one if they are numerically identical, meaning that they refer to the same individual entity. And in this case, as in the case of planet Venus having been called as a morning star and the evening star are identical, because morning star and the evening star, they both refer to the planet Venus, and hence this is an identical relationship that we can see here. Now, having understood various types of identity, what identity means, let us now come to what do we mean by identity in the idea of mind and the brain, or in philosophy of mind, what do we mean by this identity theory? So some philosophers, they argue that mind and brain are qualitatively identical, meaning that mental states and brain states share same properties or characteristics, while others argue that they are numerically identical, meaning that the mind and the brain are the same thing. So according to the identity theory of mind, it is the stronger claim that they accept, which is the numerical identity. So apart from this distinction, it is the numerical identity which is a more stronger claim of identity between mind and the brain, where they are not saying that mind and the brain, they share certain qualities and hence they are identical. In fact, they are saying that mind and the brain, or as we will look further, that mental states and physical states, they are identical or they are the same. And that is a more stronger claim that these philosophers are taking. So as per the numerical identity, it means that mental states are not just qualitatively identical to the brain states. They are in fact, or we can, they are not just similar, in fact they are literally one and the same thing. So from the aspect of qualitatively identical, we would say that two things are similar to each other, having similar properties or similar characteristics. But here in the case of when we are talking about identity of mind and the brain, from the perspective of numerical identity, it is a stronger claim, because they are saying that it's not just similar. In fact, they are literally one and the same thing. So therefore, numerical identity believes that mental states such as beliefs, desires and emotions are identical to specific patterns in patterns of brain activity. According to this view, there is no mental state that is not also a brain state, and vice versa. This position is often associated with physicalism, the philosophical view that everything in the universe is ultimately physical in nature, which we had already discussed in our previous lecture, that how these physicalists are trying to explain mind from the physicalist aspect and reducing the mind to the brain processes. Now the question that arises here is mind really identical to the brain? So when philosophers are proposing the identity theory of mind, they are not saying that mind is identical to the brain. What they are instead arguing is that mental states are identical to the brain states. So we need to understand this distinction here, because when these philosophers, when we are saying the identity theory of mind, the identity between mind and the brain, the philosophers are not really saying that mind is identical to brain. In fact, what they are trying to argue is that mental states are identical to the brain states. So in the context of mind-brain identity, the claim is that mental states such as our thoughts, emotions, perceptions are identical to specific brain states. This means that whenever there is a particular mental state, there is a corresponding brain state that accompanies it. However, the identity theory does not necessarily imply that the mind as a whole is identical to the brain. Okay, so it's only the mental states or mental processes that are understood in terms of the brain states and brain processes, not that mind and brain are identical. So while mental states are said to be identical to the brain states, other aspects of the mind such as consciousness or the sense of self may not be reducible to the specific brain states. In this sense, the mind is not identical to the brain as a whole, but rather a product of specific brain activity that gives rise to mental states. Now, there are two types of identities that we deal with in philosophy of mind, which is the type identity and the token identity. So, type identity and token identity refer to different ways of understanding the relationship between mental states and brain states. Type identity theory posits that mental states and brain states are of the same type. This means that for every type of mental state, there is a corresponding type of brain state. For example, mental state of pain is of the same type of a particular kind of brain state. So, type identity theory suggests that mental states can be reduced to physical brain states, and therefore all mental states are identical to specific physical states in the brain. What do we mean here when we are saying this type identity, or that there are mental states of the particular type which are identical to the physical brain states? We mean to say that it's in a more generalized manner, that there is a generalized mental state which has a corresponding type of brain state here. So, in contrast to type, there is token identity theory, which posits that mental states and brain states are only identical on case by case or token basis. That means a particular specific occasion, these mental states have a corresponding brain state. This means that while there may be a specific brain state that corresponds to a particular mental state of pain, there is not necessarily a general type of brain state that corresponds to all instances of, let's say, pain, which is a specific type of mental state. So, they are only talking about the case to case or token basis here, in contrast to the type identity, where we are saying that mental type correspond to a physical type or the physical brain type. So, what do we mean by mental type? It can be defined as a kind of sensation. For example, a general sensation of pain. So, while a brain type is a physical neural process that can be described as pain, for example, C fibers firing. That is a specific you can say that is a type of physical neural process from the perspective of the physical idea of pain, and that is defined as a C fibers firing. So suppose we examine a patient who is having pain. We can see through scanning that a certain neural processes would fire when he is having a sensation of pain. So as soon as he has pain, there is a specific change in his neural settings that takes place, which shows that having a mental type of sensation which is a pain, there is also a corresponding physical neural process which is happening in his brain. So there is this correspondence between this mental type and the physical type of a particular sensation. That means that of a pain, the sensation of pain that he is feeling has a corresponding physical neural process which leads to some kind of change in his brain. Whereas a mental token is a specific instance of that general sensation. For example, that pain he is really feeling right now when he hit his toe. So, a mental type is a more generalized idea or generalized theory where we are saying that there is a sensation of pain, while in token we are talking about that particular instance of pain that a person is having. So, that is a token, mental token having a corresponding physical token. So, mental token is a specific instance of that general sensation of that of pain. So, brain token is a specific instance of neural process. So, the C fiber firing specifically when he hits his toe in that specific moment. So, in that specific instance, specific moment or specific time when he really felt it, that is known as the token identity. So, token identity theory holds that every individual instance or token of a mental state can be identified with a specific physical state or process in the case of pain. For example, a token identity theorist might argue that every instance of the mental state of pain corresponds to a specific physical state or process in the body, such as the excitation of the certain nerve fibers. So, this view contrasts with type identity theory, which holds that mental states are identical to specific types of physical states or processes rather than individual tokens of those states. In other words, according to the type identity theory, all instances of pain are identical to a specific type of physical state or process that corresponds to the mental state of pain. Now, type identity theory, it entails that mental kinds are identical to physical kinds. It follows that every individual instances of mental kind will also be an individual instance of physical kind. Therefore, token identity theory is entailed by the type identity theory. However, the reverse is not true. So, even if a concrete particular falls under both a mental kind and a physical kind, this does not guarantee the identity of the kinds themselves. In other words, just because a mental state and the physical state can be correlated at the level of individual instances or token, this does not mean that mental kinds and the physical kinds are necessarily identical at all levels of types. So, let us take an example of arm pain in two people. Type identity theory holds that arm pain is identical to a specific type of physical state or process. For example, it might identify arm pain with the firing of C fibers in the nervous system. Token identity theory, on the other hand, holds that each individual instance of token of arm pain corresponds to the specific physical state or process. For example, if two people experience the arm pain, each instance of arm pain in each person correspond to a specific instance of C fiber firing in their respective nervous system. So in this example, the type identity theory would claim that both people's arm pain is identical to the same type of physical state or process, while the token identity theory would claim that each individual instance of arm pain in each person corresponds to specific instance of C fiber firing in their respective systems. So we are going to continue this idea of identity theory in our next lecture as well. We will be taking up particularly, maybe we will be taking up JJC Smart's arguments or defense of mind-brain identity theory, and we will see what are the various arguments in favor of identity theory and also against identity theory. So thank you friends for watching our videos, and hope to see you in the next lecture, where we will be elaborating more on the identity theory, taking up specifically JJC Smart's theory on mind-brain identity. Thank you very much.